Hello everyone. So in the third part of vessels or blood vessels, we have discussed the most important part. In the last part, we will talk about mainly about blood flow, starting from capillary exchange, bulk flow, how blood flows through pulmonary circuit, systemic circuit, and finally we'll talk about some important blood vessels in our body. Okay, so how blood flow is controlled in our body is basically a function of two things: extrinsic control or intrinsic control. Extrinsic control means something that is control of blood flow in an organ, but is that is controlled by something else, something outside of that organ. For example, certain nerves controlling blood flow in that organ, or some hormones controlling that. Or intrinsic, exactly the opposite thing, that is controlling the blood flow that is inside, basically auto-regulated, whatever is happening inside. For example, let's suppose stroke volume in a heart. So how much is the stroke volume of heart in outside? It can be controlled by nervous system, of course, basically, or certain hormones can control it, as well as it will also be controlled, also be a factor of blood vessels. So blood vessels play a very important role in there, which is not exactly a part of the heart itself. Intrinsically, what will control it? For example, there is a auto regulation, a local control, which is basically the auto regulation or auto rhythmic process that happens in the heart that will control the stroke volume. Another example, suppose your skeletal muscles at rest when you are not doing anything strenuous activity, then it receives 20% of the total blood. But when you are doing certain activity, then blood is redirected and goes into the skeletal muscles more, and then you have 70% of the total blood flow. Okay, what are the intrinsic controls in this case? The skeletal muscle itself, the vessels inside, the arteries, arterioles inside, right, they will dilate so that they can accommodate more blood that is coming. Extrinsic control, for example, like other organs like kidneys, digestive organs, so kidneys will start filtering more blood, like retaining more blood actually, and more blood will be directed from the digestive system to the skeletal muscles, right? Although MAP is maintained during this redistribution as well. Like wherever the blood is getting distributed, the mean arterial pressure of the entire body is still maintained. Um, and then skeletal muscles blood flow varies with the fiber type and activity. At rest, for example, myogenic and neural mechanisms predominate and maintain a flow of 1 liter per minute. If you are active or exercising and doing hyperemia during muscle activity, blood flow increases and direct proportion that is directly related to the metabolic activity. All right, for example, you are exercising. In that case, your oxygen content in the blood will be low in skeletal muscles. Carbon dioxide will be higher. More hydrogen means it can become more like acidic, and other metabolic products will increase. So in that case, so that this does not get into a toxic form, the arterioles will like dilate, right? And in that case, more blood will be drawn towards that area. More blood means these conditions will be diluted, so increase in carbon dioxide will be diluted, right? So the blood will not become that acidic anymore, and that case the muscle blood flow will increase, and this is called as active hyperemia. During blood flow, muscle flow or muscle activity, the blood flow is basically getting increased by a couple of folds. Okay, it can increase up to 10 folds. What about brain? So brain cannot, it is not possible that brain is not receiving any blood flow. If it does, then it can become a stroke. So it always have to maintain a blood flow, which is about, on an average, it's at about 750 ml a minute. Okay. Control mechanism, of course, metabolic situations will control blood flow in brain. For example, like decreased pH or increased carbon, like basically pH, carbon dioxide, these factors are important. So if this is pH is too much decrease or carbon dioxide too much high, that means the blood is becoming acidic in brain, and that is again fatal. So therefore, then our vessels will start dilating, so that vasodilation can happen, more blood can be drawn into brain at that time. Skin actually functions blood flow through skin. It is pretty important, and it is heavily like full with vessels, skin. Why? Because Skin with the vessel supplies nutrients to cells. It is very important for maintaining our body temperature through skin and these blood vessels. So we have learned about this in 208. Whenever we are whenever there is an increased body temperature, then our vessels vasodilate so that we can release the extra temperature, extra heat. And then also skin is basically, with all these vessels, it is also a blood reservoir. Lots of vessels are there in our skin. Lungs. So lungs is associated with pulmonary circuit, starting from heart to lungs. It's a short circuit, of course. It is supplied with arterioles, veins, venules, everything. But the blood pressure is pretty low, 24 to by 10 mmHg, versus in systemic blood pressure we already know 120 by 80. So pretty low pressure is maintained. Autoregulatory mechanism. Low oxygen level means there will be again vasoconstriction, and high levels will promote, basically high oxygen level will promote vasodilation, which will allow blood flow to oxygen rich areas of lungs. In heart, we know this is called as coronary circulation within the heart, right? So during ventricular systole, means during contraction again, coronary vessels are obviously compressed when the heart is contracting as a whole. And as a result of this, the myocardial, like the blood flow within the heart, that also ceases for a little bit, right? And stores myoglobin. There are certain myoglobin molecules, certain proteins that actually supplies the sufficient oxygen at this time. During diastole, when it's like not contracting or relaxing mode, high aortic pressure forces blood through the coronary circulation like any other organ. But at rest, coronary blood flow, when rest means when it is not in contraction phase, heart never really rests. So the blood flow is approximately 250 ml a minute. Okay. But during strenuous exercise, this can change. Blood flow will increase 3 to 4 times, because only the cardiac cells, in that case, because cardiac cells are the one that are responsible for the pumping action, not the other cells that's present in heart. So in that case, when heart is pumping more, so you have increased body activity, means heart is pumping more blood, 65% of the blood will be delivered to those cardiac cells, as opposed to only 20-25% will be delivered to other cells. So again, with exercise, blood flow is redirected. Again, always remember, wherever we are redirecting blood flow, that's okay. But in our body, the MAP, the mean arterial pressure, is always maintained, because if there is an imbalance, that could be super fatal for us. So it doesn't matter your heart's blood flow is increased or blood flow in the skeletal muscle is increased, MAP is still in balance. Capillary exchange. What is capillary exchange? So we do know capillary exchange happens with the capillaries. Okay, so and why is it important? Because in this way we actually exchange, when blood is in the capillaries, in that way we actually exchange nutrients, gases within our tissue level, in the cellular level, and that is achieved with the help of capillaries. Okay, but velocity across the capillaries changes as blood travels through systemic circulation. We do know that velocity is highest in the aorta, increases in veins, kind of in the middle, but really slow also in capillaries, right? Capillaries have largest area, means capillary is spread across all across our body, right? In every single part of our body, it is rich with capillaries. Therefore, it has the slowest flow. Okay, and this actually allows adequate time for blood exchange when blood and like exchange of blood between tissue and then the capillaries itself. All right, so for example, you see aorta, if you see in terms of square centimeter in body, aorta has a really slow, like really it takes a small chunk of our body's area, but velocity is super high because blood flows really fast. But in capillaries, they are spread all across our body, so therefore they have a high area that they're occupying in our body, but the blood flow is really slow. This kind of in the middle in the veins or venules. So what is this capillary exchange? Capillary exchange simply means capillary exchange of what? Capillary exchange of nutrients and respiratory gases happens. This is the capillary, and then it is exchanging stuffs with the cells, with the interstitial cells, right? It can be any cell. So what are the mechanisms? They do approximately 4 ways they do it. either diffusion through plasma membrane directly, for example lipid soluble substance from the blood to the cells, or movement through intracellular clefts. There are small gaps through that which would be mostly water soluble substance, or movement through fenestration means certain gaps which is again water soluble substances. Transport via vesicles, which would be larger substances. So these are the way. Okay. Now, what about bulk flow? Bulk flow means that fluid is forced out of cleft of the capillaries and then basically returns to blood at the venous end, right? So, what is bulk flow? It is the amount of blood that is forced out of the capillaries and again then returns. That's basically so how this balance of maintenance of the blood that is thrown out of the capillaries and coming back, that balance is need to be maintained, and that flow is basically the bulk flow. Okay, two important pressures are two important points. Two important things are important here, or two opposite forces are important here. One is hydrostatic pressure, another is the osmotic pressure or colloid osmotic pressure. So how does it work? This is how. So suppose this is the capillary end of capillary, and then this is the interstitial fluid of a cell. So maintenance of net filtration pressure of the bulk flow is important. And what is this thing? It is basically the amount of, in general, if I have to say in simple words, an amount of fluid that is exiting the capillary minus the amount that is entering. So whatever is maintained, that is the maintained in between, whatever remains, that is the NFP. So what are these terms? HPC, for example, this one, hydrostatic pressure in the capillary. That means that the fluid that is pushed out of the capillary. All right. If you sum it up with OPIF, which is the osmotic pressure, that means in interstitial fluid pulls fluid out of capillary again. So the interstitial fluid will pull fluid out of. So whatever is getting out of the capillary either through normal hydrostatic pressure, or whatever is the interstitial fluid is taking out of the capillary, right? That is called as the osmotic pressure. So whatever is moving out minus whatever is moving in. So HPIF means hydrostatic pressure interstitial fluid that pushes fluid into the capillary. So interstitial fluid means the water that is in, or the interstitial fluid that is in the cells, that will actually push the that can actually create a push to the capillaries because they're directly related, like too much closely associated. So it can actually push fluid in the capillary or pull out. So HPIF, therefore, whatever it will pull inside, plus OPC means osmotic pressure in the capillary itself, or that is the pulls fluid into the capillary. In other words, simply whatever is getting in the capillary minus whatever getting outside of the capillary. So that is called net filtration pressure. Okay, so that's how we calculate it, and it is important to maintain this bulk flow within the capillaries. And the net flow is out at the arterial end typically, that is called filtration, and net flow in is generally happens in the venous end of the capillaries, which is reabsorption. If there is an abnormal increase in the amount of interstitial fluid, for example, if this particular process increases too much, in that case, then fluid will be accumulated inside, and that could be caused by edema or swelling. All right, an increase in the capillary hydrostatic pressure also. Increase in the capillary hydrostatic pressure also can increase. For example, simply means more fluid being put inside the capillaries. Then the capillaries will start accumulating this fluid inside, and that condition is called as edema. Little bit of edema is okay, but if it's too much, then it can cause different kinds of problem. For example, blood vessels, first of all, the blood vessel can get blocked, or this can be a result of incompetent venous valves, which means too much blood is present in the capillaries. That's why the venous valve is not able to push the blood through the vein. As a result, too much of blood is remaining in the capillary region. Naturally, that is getting into the capillaries and then it is starting to accumulate more fluid inside the capillaries. As a result, there will be inflammation. So that is called as edema. Too much, if this happens in too much in percentage, that can result in congestive heart failure as well, because it is blocking heart vessels majorly. Now the last thing we'll talk about is the vessel system, the vascular system. So we do know that this is distributed into two ways. Firstly is the pulmonary circulation, which is a short loop that runs from heart to lungs and back to heart again. And systemic circulation, starting from heart and connecting to all parts of body, right? So heart pumps blood out of this huge artery, we know that is called the aorta, and then it divides into many sections, and then blood is returned to the heart with the help of the huge veins called the vena cava, right? Generally arteries run deep, pretty deep, and veins also run deep, and most of the time they will have the even similar name, same or similar name. For example, renal artery, renal vein, gonadal artery, gonadal vein, like that. But some certain times veins can also run superficially, like that's why you can see like veins from on top of your skin. Okay, so deep veins, if they are running parallel with the artery, they can have the same name. Superficial veins, on the other hand, they may not have the same name, because they could be something different, or they could be something additional. You may not find artery that superficially, so these will be in that case new to the deeper vein. So there might not a corresponding superficial artery related to a superficial vein. We already know the circuit, how the pulmonary and the systemic circulation works. Only one thing I want to point out, we will talk about this in the respiratory system, like how the blood exchange happen. Like we just spoke about the capillary exchange. So these are the air-filled lungs, and these are the pulmonary capillaries. So this air-filled lungs, or alveoli of lungs, actually they are full with oxygen. So that oxygen they simply like diffuse out of the cell and gets into the capillaries or into the blood vessels, then into the blood. And the carbon dioxide in similar way diffuse out of the blood vessels from the blood and gets into the lungs, and then we breathe out the carbon dioxide. So this exchange is pretty important when it comes to respiratory gas exchange in blood. How are vessels named? They actually, in couple of different ways they can be. For example, by body region. If you have an artery or vein in the femur region, then it could be named as femoral. Brachial means it's in your hand, brachial artery, brachial vein that exist. Or they can be named by the name of the organ that it is serving. For example, kidney, then it's renal. Hepatic means liver. Okay, hepatic means liver. Gonadal means gonads. Or being maybe the bone also, like vertebral means going to the vertebral column, radial, tibial, like that. All right. Systemic vessels do not always match on the right and left. Means in certain type you will see, in certain vessels you will see that they have the same name. They are divided into right and left, and they have the same name, obviously. Right X artery, or right X, or left X artery, or left X vein, right X vein. Same name, just left and right. But this can be not necessarily always symmetrical. There could be difference in that also. For example, the biggest difference we actually see in when systemic aorta branches off in this region, in a thoracic region. So what happens here? So suppose this is aorta, it makes a loop like that, like an arch like that. Slightly differently it branches off over here. So for example, in left side, it directly branches off into common carotid. Okay, common carotid, and then it becomes left subclavian. Okay, this is all left. Left subclavian. Subclavian, common carotid. But on the right side, this will not be the case. There will be a branch from the aortic arch, which we will call it as the where is this here? We will call as the brachiocephalic trunk. So this particular tiny section, I'll use a different color. This particular tiny section is called the brachiocephalic trunk. This is really small. Suppose just this region. Now after this region, the aorta will divide again, or branch off again. And after the brachiocephalic, then it forms right common carotid, right, like this, or then also right subclavian. Okay, right subclavian. So essentially there is a, in the right side there is extra thing called the brachiocephalic. Okay, so this is a example of this asymmetry, like it is not exactly the same in right and left. Then this goes down, becomes axillary artery, brachial artery in your hand, and then it will get into your palms as well. I wanted to point out this. Now in lecture, I'm not going to ask you, give you pictures and tell you to identify arteries, but questions will be based on this kind of things, like things that are pretty unique and kind of has an application some way. The abdomen will follow, then like the aorta will follow, go down and get into the abdomen, then we call it as abdominal aorta. Then it branches off and goes to different organs. For example, it will go into the adrenal gland. In this case, we'll call it as adrenal artery. It will go into both the kidneys. In that case, we'll call it the renal artery, right or left. Will go into gonads, and we'll call it as the gonadal artery. It can be testicular for males or ovarian for females. It can go into the intestines. Then there are two branches that happens. One actually supplies to the top part of the intestine. We call it that superior mesenteric, or the bottom part, then we call it as inferior mesenteric. After that, the aorta branches off into common iliac that goes into the leg. There are also arteries like gastric arteries, right and left, which connects with your stomach, right? And then yeah, like that. So I'm not going to give you pictures and tell you to identify, but one thing you have to remember is this particular difference, like this unique situation that happens with the aorta. And then what happens in the iliac artery, it again divides, it goes into the leg. Then it divides into external and internal. Obviously the external iliac artery supplies to the external part of the leg, and internal goes internally. Then the external iliac only becomes femoral when it's in the femur region, then followed by the tibial fibular artery and all of that. All right. Veins, this particular division over here, there is no aorta, but here we will see how the superior vena cava divides. Now artery divides are slightly different. So brachiocephalic trunk or brachiocephalic artery only exists in the right side, but that is not the case for veins. For veins, superior vena cava, we both have brachiocephalic. Okay, so for example, the brachiocephalic veins exist in both. So there is brachiocephalic right and brachiocephalic in the left, both. And then that actually becomes subclavian, right or left. Okay, this is right, this is left. Subclavian, brachiocephalic, then that becomes subclavian. And from brachiocephalic, actually, now it also branches off into jugular veins. Like common carotid supplies into the brain area, these jugular veins, there are two of them, that supplies into your brain, like drains out from the brain area. Okay, jugular. One is internal, one is external. Obviously, internal goes into the internal side of the brain, and external stays on the external side of the brain. All right, so there is no difference between between right and left. Then again, the same name, you will see axillary, then you will brachial vein, cephalic vein, all of that, and then followed by will go further into the hand, becomes radial, ulnar, all of that. Vertebral vein, there is also vertebral artery that connects to the vertebral column. Then it becomes inferior vena cava in the abdomen area. So now same way it will also connect to the same organs, like hepatic vein, it will connect to the liver. Suprarenal, right and left, it will connect to the adrenal gland. Renal vein to the kidney, right? There will be lumbar vein, gonadal veins, although gonadal vein will be right and left, not necessarily that will be true for artery. Then again, this actually drains into two different part and becomes the iliac veins, the common iliac, and then common iliac again branches off into external, internal, and internal. So this is iliac, like like we saw the same way here. There is iliac, common iliac artery. There is also common iliac vein. Okay. And that comes off, it's a direct branch off from the inferior vena cava. Similarly, we also have mesenteric veins, superior, inferior. There is splenic veins like splenic artery, like that connects to the spleen. There is gastric vein connected to the stomach, all of that. Then in the bottom, the common iliac also becomes femoral vein. There is one extra superficial vein we have, is called great saphenous vein, which we do not see that in artery, only exist in case of vein. It's pretty much superficial. Then also we have fibular and tibial vein, all of that. One huge difference here is hepatic portal vein. This is a unique situation. So hepatic, we do have portal vein that drains blood out of liver, but there is also hepatic portal vein, or HPV. This is a special one. What does it do? This takes nutrient rich blood from the intestine to the liver. Okay, so hepatic portal vein, which is this one, is actually supplies blood, not blue, it should be red in color, because it supplies it supplies oxygen rich blood to the liver from the intestine, or basically nutrient rich, not more than oxygen rich, it's more nutrient rich blood it supplies to the liver, from the intestine to the liver. This particular hepatic portal vein supplies nutrient rich blood, okay, so that liver can store certain nutrients. For example, liver is a storehouse of glucose, so therefore it is important that it gets the enough of that. So therefore this hepatic portal vein does that job, right? So this is a unique thing in vein. To finish off, how last two concept checks, how many branches are there in aortic arch that will give rise to, remember, 3, like this, we just spoke about this. So there is here on the right side there is a brachiocephalic, and on the left side it branches off to common carotid and then subclavian. So directly the aorta actually is divided into 3 branches. On the right side brachiocephalic, on the left side it is branching off to common carotid and then the subclavian, right? So 3 branches directly the aorta. But this is different in veins, because veins have brachiocephalic on both ends, but in arteries its brachiocephalic exists only on the right side. And this, after brachiocephalic, it again branches off into common carotid and subclavian. So there is a small extra division only in the right side though for arteries, but in veins we see brachiocephalic in both sides. Which vessels receive blood drainage from the liver and returns it into the heart? Blood drains from the liver and returns it to the heart, so which means it is talking about the deoxygenated blood. So I'm not going to tell you this, so figure this out by yourself. So there is 2 veins that actually drains blood out of liver, and one actually puts blood into the liver. Okay, so and this one is asking about which vessels receives blood drainage from the liver and puts it back into the heart, means the deoxygenated blood. So 2 veins, so figure that out yourself, like we spoke about that situation over here. All right, so with that I'll finish off this vessels lecture and keep working on the concept check and submit that by the deadline. All right, okay, see you in the next chapter. And exactly after, these are the 4 chapters. Now we have finished 4 chapters, 16, 17, 18, 19, and now next will be the exam. If you don't know when the exam is, please look up into the lecture schedule. The exam will open up 8th February at 2 p.m. and it will stay open for 24 hours. Right, before that I will also upload some more questions which will be the review questions. Otherwise, I have already uploaded lots of practice materials from each chapter, starting from different external videos. There are some lecture notes which is important. Just before the exam, I also will be uploading study guides. In few days I will be doing that, study guides, as well as some extra review questions. All right, then start prepping for the exam. Good luck with that. See you later.